Before she left the building, I sought my former party colleague's view of her opponent.
I think he's been a big beast in Scottish politics, and it would be, I think, churlish to deny that. He has a political competence, he has a charisma, and he certainly has established himself over the years as a significant figure in the political environment. I think one of his personal traits can be a rather, at times, overbearing personal demeanour. He likes to get things his own way. He likes to be the big beast in the jungle. He likes to try and dominate debate and discussion. And I mean, I certainly think it's my duty to stand up to that and to challenge that.
The ability to craft a soundbite or to beat an opponent at a hustings are important. But there's more than that to political effectiveness. The qualities of great leaders like Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, for whom I worked, are of course that they lead from the front, they have an extraordinary sense of purpose and great courage. And I wouldn't exactly compare Alex Salmond to Churchill or Thatcher, but he does have some characteristics which are important in a leader. He has a sense of destiny, and he has flexibility. He changes his mind, because very often a great leader knows the destination, but doesn't go straight to it, but rather tacks along the way. And that quality of political rubberiness would be needed by Alex Salmond throughout the 1990s. In 1992, the SNP hoped to gain from the unpopularity in Scotland of the Conservatives. But Scotland voted Labour, even as the rest of the United Kingdom rejected Neil Kinnock.
Very difficult to cope with the Labour Party argument that Neil Kinnock had the keys of number 10 Downing Street in his hands. If that turns out to be a false prospectus, and if Labour lose this election, then I think the Labour leadership in Scotland are going to have some immediate explaining to do to the Scottish people. And I think the Scottish people will take their revenge on the Labour Party in the May local elections on the 7th of May when Scotland goes to the polls again.
There would be no great breakthrough for the SNP at Westminster elections. But Salmond's flexibility and leadership skills would come to the fore in 1997. He was about to help make history. Scotland's history matters to Alex Salmond and features in his argument for independence. Here in Edinburgh, in the late 1990s, a creaking sound echoed through the streets, heralding that Scotland's Parliament was rising from its grave.
Good evening!
Good evening!
Yes, good evening. Welcome to the Witchery Murder and Mystery Tour. Now, my name is Adam Lyle, deceased.
Walking these streets, you get a feel for the Scottish capital's long and colourful past. Was it a sense of history which prompted Alex Salmond to join Labour and the Liberal Democrats to campaign for a yes vote in the devolution referendum? They walked together towards the historic election of 1999, which would bring the Parliament back to life. But the goodwill forged during the long referendum campaign would not last.
Thank you all very much, and good night. Thank you.
In an often bad-tempered campaign, Alex Salmond, as a potential First Minister, was put under more intense scrutiny than ever before. His poll ratings slid, and his Penny for Scotland policy, a promise to use the income tax-raising power of the new Parliament, didn't go down well with voters or some in his own party. What went wrong?
I don't know that anything went wrong. I think they got what they deserved.
Well, you were pretty critical at the time.
No, I offered helpful comments, which were always interpreted as being just straight criticism.
Can you remind us of the helpful comments?
Oh, I can't remember what I said now, but it will be true, I'm sure.
Or what about a penny for Scotland?
Oh, that was nonsense. That was absolute nonsense, and I said so.
That's a helpful comment.
Well, they dropped it. They dropped the Penny for Scotland thing because I was right. I don't want to dwell on anything like that. Some of the SNP may want to, but I think most of them don't. I think most of them want to forget that embarrassment.
It would be a hard lesson. You don't see the Alex Salmond of today giving such hostages to fortune.
I think the problem with Penny for Scotland was the party talked a great deal about how it raised the money, not how it spent it. And I think that's something that sometimes happens when you talk about taxation. I think we needed a much greater focus in 1999 about what that money would buy. So I think that's a collective issue, and indeed I was deeply involved in the Penny for Scotland issue. I think recognising now what happened, I think that's probably a critique I would make.
And then there were Alex Salmond's comments on the NATO bombing of Serbia.
It is an action of dubious legality, but above all one of unpardonable folly.
One of the SNP candidates for that parliament was Duncan Hamilton, a rising star who was close to the leader.
I suspect for Alec the criticism that he got over Kosovo might be a low point. And I say that not because he thinks for a minute that he was wrong about that, but because it unleashed in the middle of an election campaign something that was able to be twisted and turned against the SNP, and turned it in the middle of the campaign into a real problem. And I think it may well be that he looks back on that and thinks that whilst he may have been right, then saying it at that time may or may not have been the wisest move. But that's my guess.
Alex Salmond's outburst may have been politically costly. Had this man, often criticised for over-calculating his positions, simply exposed a powerful inner conviction whose authenticity has since proved attractive.
Kosovo, you've got to remember, Alec believes and feels things very passionately. He believed utterly that this was wrong, it was adventurism. He spoke, I would think, for the whole SNP in that. And I would much, much, much rather be in a party with a leader that does that than a leader who is mealy-mouthed when it comes to issues of real principle.
But in that first election to the Scottish Parliament, the SNP came a poor second, with 35 MSPs, 21 fewer than Labour. Alex Salmond, as leader, carried the responsibility. The election of 1999 was a disappointing result. Would you accept that?
I think it was less than we had hoped for, but more than we might have anticipated even 2 or 3 years earlier. I think expectations were perhaps very unrealistic. We had a lot still to do in 1999, although we had done a lot.
After nearly 300 years, Scotland once more had a parliament. Yet even as one of its champions, Alex Salmond was evidently burdened with disappointment, even self-doubt. Having played a key role in the successful campaign for a yes vote on devolution, Alex Salmond was elected to the first Scottish Parliament of modern times that sat here in the Assembly Hall of the Church of Scotland. But surprisingly, he didn't shine in the new role. And within a year, he was under fierce attack from hostile media.
He probably struggled to adapt from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament initially. Much was written at the time about him failing to score points at First Minister's question in opposition. I don't think that's particularly fair, because I think that the Scottish Parliament is not really set up for opposition parties. But Alec is a Westminster politician. He loves the clash and clamour. He loves the sort of the cut and thrust across the debating chamber. And to be brought into an environment which is all about consensus, cuddly politics, I think for him was not necessarily a natural transition.
Just 1 year into the new Parliament, Alex Salmond brought his decade-long leadership of the party to an abrupt end.
I have invested a great deal of time, particularly over the last year, in developing the position of the SNP as a strong team of people who are capable of taking Scotland forward. And I think after 10 years, it's time to allow someone in that team of people, that strong team that we've seen developing in the Scots Parliament, the chance to show what they can do.
11 years later, and here's the same man attempting to win an unprecedented second term as First Minister. How can such success and self-confidence have returned to a man who a decade ago was dubbed by some a quitter? While he was on the campaign trail, I asked him why he threw in the towel back in 2000.